caterhamracer.com Academy Championship is sponsored by Just Add Lightness, high-performance LED lights for the Caterham 7. Hello again, once again everybody, Scott Woodwiss and Chris Hutchinson here, guiding you through some more esports style action over at caterhamracer.com. And we're back at the virtual representation of the mini Nürburgring of the North, Cadwell Park in Louth in Lincolnshire, for the second round of the season for the caterhamracer.com Academy Championship, of course sponsored by Just Add Lightness LED lights for the Caterham 7. So we've already had the 420Rs complete their races, and ahead of the second meeting of the season for the real life Caterham Academy and the first for the other 4 championships in the Caterham Motorsport ladder, we're taking a second visit to Cadwell to round off our double visit here from both championships. Heading into the weekend, I guess we can give you a quick rundown of where we are with the points. So heading into the meeting, it is James Murphy on 68 points, ahead of Jaroslav Cherny from the Czech Republic on 67. Christian Zaruta sits third with 61, ahead of Paul Vernehoff with 59. Then it's a point ahead of both Blair McConaughey and David Rowe, who sit 5th equal in points. And it's Steve McMaster, who is not here tonight. We believe he's on holiday, so hopefully he's relaxing somewhere. There's Matt Shepard, Chris Skillicorn and Will Rossetti round out the top 10. The key thing to note, though, is that James Murphy was unable to qualify into Group A for tonight, and that means he will be racing on Grid B. So even if he wins both races, he will only score as many points as around about sort of if he was racing in an overall race and it was 18th place. So it's fairly likely that the points lead will change tonight from James Murphy to someone else. But who that's going to be, Chris, depends on what happens in these 2 Grid A races and if either of them can even score any points at all.
Yeah, we've got some sort of different names on the grid tonight. So obviously with the race meeting coming up at Cadwell this coming weekend, some people have had to travel up there, other people are taking this opportunity to go on holiday, things like that. So we've got some different names on the A grid tonight, so you can see some different people, and yeah, an opportunity for the people who are in sort of 2nd and 3rd in the championship to actually make some ground up.
Yeah, we should mention another couple of drivers who are not here for drivers who regularly race. Jim Erthen we're looking at here, who is a regular racer in real life in Caterham's. Chris Skillicorn is not here tonight. Again, he has been one of the drivers who, as Chris just mentioned, will have gone up today for one of the test days at Cadwell Park ahead of their second race meeting of the season. Of course, Chris was in fine form in the wet conditions at Alton Park for his first race and was so close to a win on his debut. And we like to think that the racing he did in the lockdown and obviously just beforehand helped him go pretty quickly. We can also, I think we'll also take credit in some cases for Dominic Mansberger's success as well, because of course he won first time out in Alton Park in those treacherous conditions. So of course congratulations to Dominic for doing so. And we like to think that all the esports stuff he did over the lockdown, Chris, has kind of maybe helped him somewhat to get him to grips with not just how the car feels but the circuits. And it was certainly some homework he did, some virtual homework that seems to be, well, quite well put to use, and a job well done.
Makes you race ready, doesn't it? You know, it keeps you in the attitude, the mindset, the same kind of mentality you need in a race. You're gonna have in a virtual race. It's, you're racing against the same people in sort of virtual cars. So, of course, it keeps you sharp, and we will take every bit of credit we can for helping those guys go and do a great performance. And we wish everyone who's racing this weekend at Cadwell Park well, including many of the people on this grid.
Indeed. We'll quickly flick to what's happening qualifying in a second, but just in case you want to know, there is racing, of course, this weekend, as we mentioned. First weekend where all 5 of the Caterham Motorsport Championships on their official factory ladder are competing. Cadwell Park this weekend, August 1st and 2nd. If you want to attend, spectators are allowed because it is an MSV circuit. If you want to do so, though, you must purchase tickets beforehand online, because there will be no tickets being sold on the gate on the day, simply because I think MSV have to keep a record of everybody because of what's going on with the pandemic and details, just in case somebody does come down with something. We hope, fingers crossed, they don't. Touch wood. We hope everyone's as safe as possible. We know people will look after each other as best they can over the 2 days of competition. But yes, including the Academy, we'll also have the Road Sport Championship, the 270R Championship, the 310R Championship, and the newly renamed for 2020 Caterham 7 Championship UK, which has gained UK national status, same level as you would for a championship like the British Touring Car Championship or British GT, both of which are again competing this weekend for the first time in their respective opening rounds. And as you say, there are some drivers who compete in tonight who are definitely racing over the weekend. I mean, one we isn't, unfortunately, but has been in the past, is Christian Zaruta, who has just gone fastest in qualifying. David Rowe, of course, we imagine will be down with the DPR squad running all his batch of cars in the mix. Blair McConaughey's going to be down there as well. He'll be racing, and I think, if I'm correct, the 270R grid. He's going to be pushing forwards. Matt Shepard will be there as well, and just amongst a few others. And it's going to be hopefully quite an entertaining race, because I, for one, haven't personally seen Caterham racing in person at Cadwell Park. I know we talked about this with the 420R broadcast, but I imagine, given the racing that we saw in the 420Rs, and hopefully what we'll see tonight, and even seeing right now in qualifying, that it's going to be quite an exciting prospect, because it is a circuit where overtaking is at a premium, but usually overtaking that you do see is pretty spectacular, given how narrow and twisty and how tricky the nature of this circuit is. And I think there's a reason why it's given the nickname Mini Nürburgring, because it certainly feels like one, particularly with how much space you don't have on track when trying to make a move.
Yeah, in the 420s, we saw moves that took maybe 2 or 3 corners to actually get done, with the to and fro, cutting backwards, cutting under, and things like that. And in the academy, as we've seen even on different tracks, that can happen even more. So I don't really know what to expect at the moment, but I'm definitely looking forward to it. The academies obviously hold a place in everyone's heart in Caterham racing. It's kind of where a lot of us start out, and in the sim world, they really do generate some excellent racing. So I'm really hopeful that we're going to see something special tonight.
I'm certainly hoping so, because I'll be down there in person, keeping tabs on things in a BRC sense. But that's real life, which is happening this weekend. Let's get back to what's happening right now on the screen. We're just under 6 minutes to go in our qualifying session for tonight's 2 15-minute races for the Caterham Academy E-Series here with caterhamracer.com. And it is Czech Republic native Jaroslav Černý who currently has the fastest time in qualifying. He is effectively at the moment, he's second in the points, but at 1 point behind James Murphy. But given that James is racing in Grid B tonight, because he wasn't able to set a quick enough time in time for Grid A, sadly, he will score points considering everything goes well. But as we said, even if he wins both races, he won't get the same number of points as Jaroslav Černý will, because we have 17 cars on this grid, 17 cars or so, depending how many we've got trying to qualify for the Grid B. So even if James Murphy did win both races, he would only score the same number of points if everyone was on one big grid together and he finished 17th or 18th, depending on how many we've got in Grid A tonight. So it's a similar system to if someone's watched the Master MX-5 Championship before, where they have Grid A and Grid B. It's very similar to that. So system that works, and certainly means that you can still score points and get a victory, just not the same amount of level as you would if you were in the top group. So Černý has the pole by almost 0.2 of a second. He's coming across the line now to see if he can improve on his pole time, which is 1:44.2, so 1:72. Couldn't do it that time. He was about 0.3 off. Christian Zaruta currently second quickest. David Rowe, who we're looking on screen here in the DPR machine, who will once again be driving from the DPR Motorsport base on their specially built simulator. Third quickest so far. A good effort in fourth quickest for Richard Gallagher. Comes into the weekend 12th in points. Did compete at Alton Park, but he's now managed to give himself a good bit of pace. And he's only, look at where he is now, he is just under 3/4 of a second off the pole time, and only roughly about 600 or 700 ahead of Guy Crawford, who is someone who's been racing regularly in this series or in these championships, but doesn't race himself. He has a Caterham in real life, and he's certainly proving himself on the Esports side. Steve Arnell's impressing so far with 6th quickest. Paul Ferner is 7th, and then we have the rest of the top 10, which is filled out by Blair McConaughey, Andrew Parker, and then Matt Shepard, who's a little bit lower down. So some usual suspects towards the front of qualifying at the moment, Chris, but as you mentioned, guys like Gallagher and Crawford and Arnell and Parker in there, who we wouldn't normally see, but as you say, because we've got 1 or 2 drivers that aren't here because they're either at the real life Cadwell Park or couldn't qualify for Group A or on holiday in some cases, it's giving others a chance to shine here where ordinarily, all due respect, they might not have had that chance if the others were here.
Yeah, it's really good to be able to watch them. We obviously put out highlight videos of the Grid B race midweek, so you can keep up with what's happening on Grid B, but it's great for them to get their moment in the sun, isn't it, on the live broadcast, and so you can all enjoy and watch how good the field is, all the way down our racing at caterhamracer.com. So yeah, it's really good, and yep, they are looking to make hay while the sun shines.
Shout out to Jim Earlham, 11th fastest. I believe he's got some family and friends watching, so hi to everyone watching at home, wherever you might be around the world. Your man's currently 11th fastest at the moment, just outside the top 10, and roughly around sort of 0.3 off Matt Shepard's time to get himself into the top 10. Rest of the field, I can see we've got Emil Jaselic, and we've got a new driver in the field for tonight, at least one I've seen for the first time, Paul Hawker, who is racing, I believe, over in Caterham Graduates. Looks like he's got some experience in the Classic, and looks like, I think, either his best result was 5th in the standings in the Classic class in 2018, or his best race result has been 5th position. Either way, he's from the 14th, and we've got Andy Curtis and then Alan Curtis and Tom McEwing rounding up the top 16. I think we possibly have one more, unless, are we just with 16 tonight, Chris?
No, there are 17 on the grid, I'm not sure who's missing a time at the moment. It could be, and we've got Alan Curtis there spinning out. I put the camera on him and he's spun out for us. Well done. But yeah,
I'm impressed with how he parked it.
Yeah, it was very good. Maybe someone hasn't set a lap time yet without actually braking. Basically, if you go off the track, your lap time is disallowed. So it could be that one person has just not managed to yet get a lap in, and they've only got 1:40 to go, so it's getting pretty desperate for them. Let me just have a look down the list now and see if I can identify who that is, Scott.
I think, with my personal deduction, I think it might be Mr. Rossetti, because I can't see Will on the timing screen at the moment, and he's down this as a driver tonight, so unless he's having issues. There's Will. He's currently sat in, well, it shows 11th, but no, that's Jim Earlham's at 11th place, so I suspect maybe that his best time might be enough to put him 11th, but as you say, it might be a time that hasn't been allowed officially because he's been cutting corners.
That's exactly it, Scott. So yes, he has set a time, which is 45.7, which is a very respectable time indeed, but if you cut the corners and it disallows it, it does not count for qualifying, so at the moment he's staring down a 17th place with all those cars in front of him.
Across the first part of the Hall bends there, it's not exactly doing him any favours as he heads out through the hairpin and through Barn Corner, watching Christian Zaruta hop over the crest. We should mention that heading into hairpin and Barn Corner as the Hall bends, there is quite, in the sim version of Cadwell Park, quite a large crest which we were getting quite a lot of entertainment from, watching drivers catching major air from in the 420R. We will see some of the Academy drivers do that, but of course we should clarify for those who, in case they're wondering, have never seen Cadwell Park in real life before, the crest isn't that severe, so if you are happen to be going to Cadwell Park this weekend, you won't see, unless they're going dramatically fast, you won't see cars catching that much air with all four wheels off the ground heading towards the last two corners, because it's simply just a bit of a slight exaggeration on the mod version of Cadwell Park we're using in this championship. So it's fun to watch in the sim version, but I think we can guarantee, Chris, they won't be doing that quite so much unless something's gone badly wrong in the real cases.
No, but we do often see them catch a little bit of air over the mountain. Now, we are on board with Cherney here, and we're just about to go up over the mountain following Earlham. And just over this crest here, it's quite usual to have wheels off the ground. So it is a spectacular and unique track in that respect. The gradient going up into the mountain is pretty extreme. And yep, cars, and if you ever watch superbikes around here, they absolutely launch over that mountain section.
Yeah, I've seen many a time of a clip where I've seen in the pre-superbikes, and they do hop over on one wheel, almost wheeling over the crest whilst in mid-air, which is quite a extreme feat to manage. As we see Jaroslav Cherney coming to complete his last flying lap. He's got a little bit of a toe from Jim Earlham in front, but he doesn't improve his time and remains provisional pole. I'm going to wait for everyone else to come through and finish. Here's David Rowe, who is just over 3/10 off the pole position time as he works his way through the mountain. He'll head over the crest and doesn't catch too much air, but the car will go at least very light across that part because it's such a steep climb, and then the sort of crest sort of levels off very quickly, which hence why you get some cars getting either very light or catching a little bit of air with a couple of wheels off the ground. I have seen even Caterhams, even Mazda MX-5s do that in the past. Maybe not so much Caterhams, I haven't seen them before. But even so, David Rowe makes his way out of Barn Corner onto the pit straight, and if he can improve at all on 144.172, that'll put him on provisional pole. Across the line he goes, and he remains third. I think he improved his time, but didn't quite. No, he did improve his time, but he didn't get himself any higher than third because he is only just over 2/10 off. So he found about a tenth of a bit in that last lap, which is impressive. Guy Crawford managed to finish 6th quickest, and now with the last couple of cars finishing their laps, we are moving across to the first of our two races. So, with qualifying finished, here's how they're set to line up for race number 1 of tonight at Cadwell Park in the caterhamracer.com Academy Championship. Jaroslav Cherney from Czech Republic has pole, and he will have Christian Zaruta alongside him on the front row of the grid. A good effort from David Rowe saw him improve his time to pick up third fastest, but he will start from the second row alongside Richard Gallagher. Mega last effort from Will Rossetti, didn't spot that, but in his final lap he did manage to keep it all on the black stuff and pick up 5th fastest time, so good effort from Will. But it's Guy Crawford 6th, Steve Arnell 7th, with one of his personal best efforts, ahead of Paul Fernerhuff, then Blair McConaughey and Andrew Parker rounding out the top 10. 11th fastest for Matt Shepard. He might be a bit disappointed with that, but he'll have some work to do from mid-pack. Then it's Jim Earlham 12th, Tom Allen 13th, and it's Emil Jaselink, who's been a front runner in the 420Rs, but still getting to grips with the Academy cars in 14th. And then Paul Hawker on his debut, Alan Curtis, and then Tom McEwing. The spread between the times, 2.7 seconds between them. It's pretty close towards the front, and it could be indication for what we're about to see. So going into this first race then, Chris, looking at how close it is towards the front, top 8 cars are separated by less than a second. It's always easy to speculate based on qualifying results because it's everyone going at their ultimate pace, but do we think that qualifying gives us any kind of a clear indication of who to expect towards the front, or is it a bit deceptive given the fact that Cadwell Park is quite a circuit where, to use a phrase, anything can happen in motorsport, it usually does, and Cadwell Park is certainly a circuit that does promote and prompt unpredictability. Do you think we're going to see more of that tonight?
So, yeah, I mean, I would certainly prefer to be at the front of this grid. Let me just get us to the front of that grid, because it's a wall of cars that you've got. If you're sat near the rear of the grid, it's just literally a wall of cars, and with the limited overtaking spots and the way that any issues up front ripple back down through the field, so I would certainly want to be up front with the in this gaggle, and so that in that respect, the qualifying is really important at this track, and certainly at the race weekend this weekend, I would want to qualify high up the grid. But I think as much as anything, it's going to be limiting your mistakes more than more than actually your absolute fastest time. So the guys that don't make as many mistakes and spins will be the ones that actually win these races.
So getting set for the first couple of races here tonight at Cadwell Park, and it should be quite a fascinating contest. We've got on the front row of the grid, you can see the all-red Caterham of Jaroslav Cherny on pole position on the right, the white, fluorescent yellow and black Caterham, what I always call the Brawn GP Special, for Christian Zaruta alongside him. Then it's the distinctive black and green of David Rowe, and an impressive effort there, of course, from Richard Gallagher, that's put himself 4th fastest in the almost pale, almost sky blue Caterham in 4th place. The golf coloured car of Will Rossetti on the right in 5th. The orange car with the black stripes is Guy Crawford. And then we head down the rest of the order towards the back of the field. 15 minutes of action, the first of 2 caterhamracer.com Academy Championship races. Here come the lights at the top of the screen. When all 6 of them go out, race number 1 will be underway. It is Cherny and Zaruta on the front row of the grid. Who's going to win the sprint down towards Coppice for the first time? Lights are out, and 15 minutes of caterhamracer.com action is underway. Everyone appears to have got away pretty cleanly from the start as Cherny takes the lead with Zaruta slotting in. Cherny's already going to the racing line with Rowe in there for 3rd place. Darting up to try and get 4th appears to be Will Rossetti of Richard Gallagher. They file their way through Coppice and into Charlie's, this long double apex right-hander up the hill. And then they'll head out of the right-hander and then onto the back straight. And now already going for the lead, it seems, is Christian Zaruta. He's swarming around the roll cage of Jaroslav Cherny as they head over the crest and up towards the corner at the end of the straight. And then we'll head up towards Chris Curve after that. And looking to the outside for the lead goes Christian Zaruta. Can't make it stick as he turns through the right-hander and up through Chris' corner for the first time. So everyone appears to have got away pretty cleanly, but already there's a pretty vigorous battle for the lead going on here, Chris, between Cherny, Zaruta and Rowe, and it seems to be potting up pretty quickly, with only half a lap completed through the gooseneck.
These 3 have been trading fastest laps all week on the practice servers. Christian actually set the fastest pre-qualifying time, but just to put in perspective, Cherny went 2/10 faster in that qualifying session than anyone has done all week, so it's a really impressive result. I think just saw Parker spinning off in the background there. But yeah, so I expect this race to be race long. Cherny is a person who likes being out in front, but then we also know that Christian is an absolute hound dog. He really will just continue to sit on your bumper and hound you all race long. And then we've got David Rowe, who famously seems to make little mistakes. So can he just hold in there, maybe sit there for a little bit and wait for these 2 to have a fight before he then sticks his nose in?
Yeah, usual trait for David Rowe is that he does make a decent start, but it's usually within the first couple of laps typically that he makes some kind of mistake and then has to pay for it, trying to fight back through the field, through the rest of the race to get himself in a good starting spot for race number 2. So end of the first lap then, Cherny leads the way with Zaruta in 2nd, Rowe is there, tucked underneath him in 3rd. Gallagher's having a great start, he's maintained 4th place, so good effort from Richard in what is only his 2nd appearance in this championship so far. Then it's Crawford 5th, Steve Arnell's holding station one of his best positions in 6th, 7th place for Paul Fernerhuff. Then it's Blair McConaughey, Matt Shepard, who's come up a couple of spots where he started outside the top 10, and Jim Earlham into the top 10 in position 10. Then it's Giselic, Hawker, Curtis, McEwing, and not a good start for Will Rossetti. Looks like he got caught up on the first lap, and he was dropped down to 15th position. As looking down the outside for the lead goes Christian Zaruta again, but he runs wide over the curb. He was very lucky not to run too far off, and now he's under threat from David Rowe, his DPR team boss, as they turn through Chris Corner. And now up towards the gooseneck, where it funnels into a long right hand and then flick left down the hill towards the very tricky braking zone at Mansfield. It is a corner where you are having to brake whilst the car's carrying the momentum of going downhill, so you have to brake a little bit earlier than you normally would have to expect in order to get the car stopped in time. Then you funnel out of Mansfield, down the short straight under the bridge, and then towards the mountain for the second time. And you can see already that David Rowe, as we ride on board with him, is going to try and get past us. A little bit of a bump in the rear of Zaruta's Caterham as they come up through the mountain, over the crest and towards Hall Bends for the second time. And you just possibly sense that the little mishap with Zaruta there, Chris, has just allowed David to get in there. But I wonder if David's going to try and learn from his past mistakes. I think if I try and make a silly move here or try and push too hard, I'm not going to make it happen. He knows he has to get past Zaruta as quickly as possible, because if he doesn't, Chris, Shane's going to just run up the road and take his first win in the Academy this season after it was a double victory last time out.
Yeah, look what that battling's done. One mistake from Christian going into the bend at the top of the hill, and look at the gap immediately to Cherney out front. And the obviously battling with David is not going to help that, and Richard Gallagher is just sat there waiting for a mistake to happen. So, as you said, a great result in one of his first races with us. He joined after season 1, so one of his first races on live camera, I think, tonight, but he's doing a great job so far.
Yeah, excellent stuff from Richard Gallagher, of course, 4th at the moment, and keeping in touch with the battle for 2nd place. We're on to lap 3 here of this first race in the caterhamracer.com Academy Championship. Will Rossetti's made up another spot from after his early troubles. He's back to 14th, getting past Tom McEwing just after the end of the second lap. But already we can see the bright red Caterham of Jaroslav Cherney from the Czech Republic. Really trying to pull away. For those who don't know who Jaroslav is, he's been one of the two very helpful guys in helping develop these mods together further, because the original cars for Assetto Corsa for this mod, for both the Academy and the 420Rs, were put together by both not just Ben Obro, but also by Jaroslav, and he was the man that worked on the physics for these cars, which means that technically he knows these mod cars better than anyone else in terms of how they handle and how to get the best out of them. But something that's been critical over the series during lockdown and also here in the championship is that the drivers who race these cars for real have been giving these two so much feedback on how to make them even better for the physics and how to make them handle. It's been absolutely vital in making these cars much quicker, and they've tweaked the default setups a little bit to make them a bit more like the real life cars, make them a bit more drivable, and it really has been something that the drivers have been taking on quite a lot. Taking on 12th place appears to be Alan Curtis, as he was trying to squeeze past Jim Earlham, who's holding on to position. He's now fallen behind Paul Hawker, who's made up a few places where he started, up into 11th place, and he's not too far away from Evan Giselic, who has also risen up a couple of places since he first started away from the grid, and he's up into a top 10 place in the top 10 behind Matt Shepard. So some drivers that started a little bit lower down than they would have liked, Chris, have been making some good progress in the early laps, but now they're starting to spread out a bit more here as the pack starts to get a bit more sort of spread eagled and in amongst their own little scraps.
I was just about to say, Scott, it's quite interesting, isn't it, that how the gaps down the field are kind of a second here, a second there between all the drivers as they give each other a little bit of space, and it's sort of settling in. The racers here in this group we're following now, that's Earlham, then Curtis, and then Rossetti recovering back. This is the sort of closest battle, and it's towards the rear, but these, Earlham and Curtis here have been going at it for the last lap or two. And it looks like Curtis is going to make that move up. Oh, it's tight on the inside there. Oh, and Earlham actually does leave the track. I don't think there was any contact, but just having the car on the inside forced him off the track there.
I think there was just a bit of a point where two cars were going to meet in the same place, and they decided, nope, not going to happen. Decided to try and turn out a bit, not make contact. And while Rossetti is trying to take advantage of that, he had a free pass getting through ahead of Jim Earlham. Now he's trying to do the same thing, trying to get past Curtis. He dives up the inside into Mansfield. Daring move, and says thanks boys, and turns his way out to the right hander. I can guarantee that he's definitely not a rookie despite the yellow and black cross on the back. That's probably just a feature of his Academy livery from a couple of years ago in many cases, but even so he is still pressing on now. He's up to 12th position. His next target is about 4.5 seconds up the road, that being Paul Hawker in 11th position. We're back to our race leaders as Cherney has a 1.67 second advantage. Another new fastest lap, which is near qualifying pace, 1:44.218 for the Czech driver. It's now Zaruta still in second with a tiny gap now to Rowe that he's managed to pull out. And in turn, Rowe has also got a bit of a cushion over Richard Gallagher. Then it's 6th for Steve Arnell still, and then 3.5 for McConaughey, Shepard and Giselic, rounding out that top 10. And then of course it's Hawker, Rossetti with a personal best, and then it's McEwing, Curtis, Allen, Parker and Jim Earlham, who also seems to have hit some strive, so he's now down to the back of the field and is back in 17th place as we watch the leaders make their way towards Park Corner for the 4th time.
I think I heard on the audio Jim Earlham, I think, went off at the bottom of the hill just where we were watching Will Rossetti do that really last of the late breakers braking move. And so yeah, I think that's where he actually left the track, and that's put him back down the grid. So we'll keep an eye whether he can make his way further back up. Christian has managed to shake the attentions of David Rowe now, so he can concentrate fully ahead rather than having to look in his mirrors all the time. Will he have the pace to pull back, Cherney? But Cherney's putting in times that we've not seen yet this week, and so he's got his work cut out.
Certainly has, and the gap is looking pretty static at the front here. The gap's not really moving any more further than about 1.6, 1.7 seconds. So it does seem to me that the fighting which both Zaruta and Rowe got involved in the early laps appears to have kind of just caused a bit of a stalemate as a few laps later, because unless Zaruta can really start to close in these next few corners and start to bring that gap in slowly and steadily, he's looking as though the gap is going to be pretty much keeping pretty even. It's very punch and counter punch throughout the lap between the two drivers. One point there it did drop down to about 1.3, but it seems as though just heading through those last few corners it seemed to work. Now lap time wise, incredibly, all three of the top three cars did 1 minute 44.4, so there was literally about a few hundredths of a second between them, and Zaruta was fractionally faster, but it hasn't brought the gap down that much more. And likewise with Rowe, as he's starting to keep tabs on following Rowe. And Zaruta, as I mentioned, that Zaruta runs wide, which is not going to help his cause in keeping up with Cherney and also keeping ahead of Rowe. Rowe was about 9/10 per second, but I think Zaruta, Chris, must have kept his foot in, because he hasn't lost as much time as I thought he would have done. He's still only 1.7 behind Cherney, still a second ahead of Rowe, and hasn't lost, barely any time at all from that one.
Yep, there's some fairly grippy grass at places around this track. In qualifying and practice, your time will be disallowed, but obviously in the race, even if the time's disallowed, you have to go off a bit more than that to actually get a penalty. It's worth. Will Rossetti still making his way back up. He's now into 11th place. He just made his way past Paul Hawker. So next on his list is Giselic, who's about 2.6 seconds up the field. We have seen. I was gonna say we have seen Cherney face pressure before, and he does start getting a bit more ragged at that point. But it is a while since we've seen that. So I'm sure if Christian could get a second closer, things might change around. We've seen McMaster sort of put that pressure on. But you have to work ever so hard to get back that time you've lost.
Especially on a circuit where it's rather unforgiving given how narrow it is and twisty, such as Cadwell Park. It's definitely not easy to pick up more time. You have to rely on the cars around you to start losing time, and at the moment, Cherney's not really doing that, and Zaruta's only managed to hold himself up while losing time in throughout the second half of the lap. The gap has gone up now to 1.9 seconds. It was just over 2 at one point, and lap time-wise, as they came across the line, Cherney was the fastest man, because Zaruta was slower by about 3/10, so that just shows how much time he lost in the second part of that particular lap. We're watching here the scrap for 5th position between Guy Crawford and that man Steve Arnell. Steve Arnell, who is a regular in the Caterham Graduates, he normally races in the Sigmax Championship. He was 11th in the series in last year, so he's certainly trying to make his way up through the mix. And his first experience in Caterham was with the Graduates Club. He returned to the Sigmax last year after some tuition and some practice, got a few top 10 finishes, and he's also been doing a bit of racing, mainly on iRacing. He's practiced and entered the Mazda Cup, so he's a very refined driving machine like the Caterham. He's certainly putting that to good use now, and he's certainly proving he's got some pace in a sim, particularly in a sim Caterham, using some of that real world experience to good use as well, keeping in touch with Guy Crawford, who we mentioned earlier on, doesn't race Caterhams in real life, but he's certainly proving he can handle a virtual one pretty well in 5th position. And again, shout out to Richard Gallagher, who is still running in 4th place and just about keeping David Rowe in touch. Its gap is 1.4, no, it's not, it's 1.8 seconds, forgive me. The gap is 1.4 between Rowe and Zaruta, but it's 1.8 between Gallagher and Rowe as they come up through the mountain to complete another lap. There's only 3 minutes to go on the clock, so they'll get probably looking at lap time, possibly 2 more, depending on how quickly they can get across the line. It's just launching over the crest at the exit of the Hall of Bends was Christian Zaruta there. It was a rally edition Caterham rather than a circuit version, but certainly try to do what he can to close the gap in. But just at the moment, Chris, with the last couple of laps coming in, Zeroutis just doesn't have that little bit extra to start eating into that gap. He needs either a mistake or to find some kind of pace now to close on Cherney's last couple of laps. And right now, he's just not finding it.
No, he's a couple of tenths slower on average every single lap, so the gap is growing rather than shrinking. So I think that might have been settled with only 2.5 minutes to go. I was just going to say maybe Richard Gallagher is the new Guy Crawford. He's the the non-racer, but actually is able to really be up there with the league groups. So maybe Guy's got to really get back on his game again. He's not that far behind, but there's a 3-second gap between these two cars. I'm still surprised by the gaps we are actually seeing on track at the moment. 420s were able to stick a lot closer. The Academy cars seem to be a mistake here or there, and then everything spreads out.
They have spread out, as you say, coming through the gooseneck here. The gap remains at just over 2 seconds as we see Jaroslav Černý just twitch a little bit as he got wide on the exit there, running towards Mansfield, but keeping it all under control for the moment as he heads out of the left-hander and down the short sprint under the bridge towards the mountain for what will be the second to last time, because we're getting to 1.5 minutes left. This is Will Rossetti, who's still in 11th place, but he's been slowly but surely catching the Belgian Emil Jaselink and using quite a lot of curb and taking out one of the post markers at the same time as he heads out of a left-hander and through Mansfield on the second to last lap. One more to go. Leaders will come across the line very soon to start that last lap as they come into the hairpin and then through Barn Corner. And hopefully we get as decent conditions this weekend at Cadwell as we have in the sim at the moment, where it's nice clear skies and bright sunshine. Here's the onboard view from a virtual Christian Zerouta as he looks out of the windscreen of his Academy car. And his last lap was a personal best, and he was a couple of tenths quicker than Černý, but that's the view he's got, and it's so agonising. I'm sure, Chris, in real life you've been in this situation before where you can just see the car in front, but you can feel that you maybe can't push any harder unless you start taking risks and possibly going off the road. But just no matter how hard you push, and you've got the pace underneath you, your confidence in the setup, in the car and your ability, but just not able to pull enough gap back to the car in front to be able to close that gap in. It must be, as a driver, both real and in the sim, such a frustrating thing to have to experience, knowing that you're pushing as hard as you can and the car can, but the gap's just not coming down.
Scott, I'm always the car in front. I don't know what you're saying. I never. In the real world, the Caterhams have the benefit, I don't know if it's a benefit or drawback, of having such powerful tow that even a gap of this amount would still see you gaining on a car in front. But on a technical twisty track like this, you can certainly make a difference in these cars by being a quick driver. And yes, absolutely, it can be frustrating when you just haven't quite got that pace that you need to pull it back in. You can see the race happening up front and you want to get involved, but unfortunately, you just don't quite have it. And that's definitely what he's faced with. And sometimes you push extra hard then, and that costs you more time than it actually ultimately gains you.
Yeah, you start to get frustrated trying to overcompensate for the time that you're losing, and therefore you end up making more and more mistakes. But mistakes isn't in my nature for this man, Jaroslav Černý, as he makes his way in towards the hairpin and Barn Corner for the last time. And it will be, I think, after he took a win at Alton Park, he will take another lights to flag victory. Once he gets in front, there is clearly no stopping this man. Out of Barn Corner for the last time and up to the checkered flag. It will be a second win of the season in the caterhamracer.com Academy Championship for Jaroslav Černý. He picks up the victory in race 1, but it's Christian Zerouta in second, just ahead of David Rowe, who did close in at the end. A brilliant performance for Richard Gallagher. Well done for 4th place on his first few appearances. 5th for Guy Crawford, 6th for Steve Arnell, 7th for Paul Fernhoff. He had a bit of a quiet evening so far, but he remains in the top 10. But it's Blair McConaughey 8th, 9th for Matt Shepard, and then 10th on his, what I think is Academy debut, at least in the championship, for Emil Jaselink from Belgium. And then looks like Will Rossetti dropped to 12th, so something happened in the last couple of laps, because it's Paul Hawker 11th, and there is Will Rossetti in 12th. So whatever happened to Will certainly dropped him a place towards the end. 13th for Alan Curtis, 14th for Parker, and then it's McEwing, Allen and Earlham, so we can count all 17 out, and then 17 all back in again after that first race. So what we saw there, Chris, is clear, is that once you let Černý get in front, unless you've got the pace to try and close in, it doesn't really allow him to close back in a bit more unless you've got some more ultimate pace. So really, I guess the target for Zerouta has got to be to, if he can, get a better start than Černý at the beginning of the second race shortly, try and get in front, and then try and use that clear air and not battle so much with the cars behind and around him, in order to try and have any chance of beating Jaroslav in this second race.
Yeah, I agree with that. It totally is. I'm sure that's what is going through his mind as well. Obviously, finishing second, he does start on the front of the grid, which is great. But yeah, absolutely. What an amazing race by Cherney again. I think, you know, if you consider the luck for the 420s and this, that's 3 whole races where he hasn't been out the lead and has not made any mistake that we could be, you know, that we noticed, and putting in times that are qualifying times.
Absolutely. So just a quick rundown again of the result from race 1, which also sets the grid for race 2. So Cherney takes the victory from Zaruta and Rowe. Then it's Gallagher, Crawford, Arnell, Fernerhuff, McConaughey, Shepard and Jaselik rounding out the top 10. And then it's Paul Hawker 11th, while Rossetti has to start back in 12th. Then Curtis, Parker, McEwing, Allen and Earlham as we get set for race number 2. So as we mentioned, the grid set by the result of race 1, which means it's exactly the same front row that we had. In fact, it's possibly even the same second row that we had. The first 4 positions unchanged, so that means it's going to be, once again, a showdown towards Coppice Corner and through Charlie's between Cherney and Zaruta. David Rowe wants to try and get a good start from the second row. Richard Gallagher could have an effect if he could get a good start away from the line. A couple of drivers who are maybe a bit out of the position again. Blair McConaughey and Matt Shepard, I think, are a bit higher up this time. Paul Fernerhuff has had, I did mention, a bit of a quiet night tonight. He usually has some evenings when he's on the pace and up and around the top 5, and others when he drops back a bit. It seems as though Chris here at Cadwell Park, seems to be the latter. He's not quite on the same sort of pace we've seen him at times, but it could be possibly circuit variable in terms of whether it's a circuit he's comfortable with compared to others that the Caterhams usually race around the UK and indeed in the series that we've had. On
the 420s, he actually shoved it onto the second place on qualifying, so he does know how to pedal it around this track. Like you say, though, it is slightly more reserved evening for him. He might expect to be a couple more places up at least, but equally for Steve Arnell, he's really good to see him so high up in 6th place. That's his best result in a fair little while. Also worth calling out Matt Shepard, who started in about 12th, but he's got up to 9th, and he's not, you know, so far he's been on the B grid, so it's a great result for him to be moving up through the field like that, you know, and racing and just showing how you know the high quality of the, you know, in the B grid.
Yeah, and of course there'll be highlights once again, as there normally has been, produced by Chris. Of course, he'll be voicing those for Grid B once they become available later. But we focus once again on our Grid A drivers. And again, the same site that we had for the start of race number 1, which is on the right-hand side on pole, being Jaroslav Cherney, race 1 winner. And alongside him is, of course, Christian Zaruta in that white, yellow and black Caterham on the front row of the grid. Then it's David Rowe, and then from Richard Gallagher. And watch out as well for Guy Crawford and Steve Arnell from the 3rd row of the grid. Also, I'd like to Paul Fernerhuff in there, Blair McConaughey, Matt Shepard, and then Edward Jaselik starting from 10th from Belgium. And also keep an eye on Will Rossetti, who is, I think, the 7th car on the left. No, the 6th car on the left, which is the slightly sort of very pale blue and orange Caterham on the left-hand side, just ahead of Andrew Parker's silver and purple car. So 17 cars, 15 minutes once again for this second race. And points, of course, and race victory are certainly up for grabs. And there is going to be a new points leader, I'm sure, by the time we leave Cadwell Park. But whether it's going to be Cherney or somebody else, depending on the results, remains to be seen. Just engines will be ticking over as they wait for the lights to come on. You'll see them on the centre of the screen in a few moments' time. And once all 6 lights go on and then go out, the race will be underway here at Cadwell Park. We're getting set for more Caterham racing action both in the sim world and the real world, with the second round of the Academy and the first rounds for the Road Sport 270s, 310s and 7 UK Championship this weekend. But that's then, this is now, and here come the lights for our second race of the evening for the caterhamracer.com Academy. The revs will rise, and who will win the sprint towards Coppice Corner for the first time in race number 2. Red lights are up and race is on. Looks like a pretty equal start. Good start also for the second row from David Rowe. Pretty even launch, it seems, for the first couple of rows. And again, like it was in race 1, it is once again Cherney sweeping across to take the lead. Then he goes to the racing line to make sure he's got the best line through for Coppice. Into Charlie's for the first time, and again Zaruta's on him. Well, I think it was a bit of a tag there, but he's managed to try and stay on his tail for this point. And it was in his first couple of laps, remember, that Zaruta did try and make a pass down the outside. Couldn't quite make it stick. And now he's possibly going to try and put that right. He's looking this way and that to try and make a move. He's pulling alongside as they head towards Park Corner, over the crest at the top of the straight. Now, is he going to be daring enough to go down the outside? Rowe watches on. Gallagher's under threat from Arnell with a fast start from him. And Cherney might have been baited possibly into a switchback if he's not careful. But Zaruta has to check up, and now he's under threat from David Rowe as they turn through Chris Curve. now towards the gooseneck for the first time. So it is Cherney that leads the way. Zaruta in second, it's Rowe in third, Gallagher fourth, Steve Arnell's at one spot to fifth position, beating away Guy Crawford from the third row. Paul Fernell up his seventh. Rossetti has had a cracking start from 12, up 4 spots to 8. So he's had a lightning getaway from the 6th row of the grid. Giselling's up to 9th, but Andrew Parker's up to 10th. The biggest loser was Blair McConaughey, Chris, because he was in the top 10 where he started, and now he's back down towards the bottom of the field as the pack heads through the mountain for the first time in race 2.
Yeah, Blair McConaughey, I think, had an incident and dropped down the field with a couple of others, just as sort of Will Rossetti, I think, probably saw the seas part, as it were, and got through. And that's where I think, yeah, it helps to be in that midfield. If a mistake happens in front and you get lucky, you can really shoot yourself up the grid. So he's higher than he got to, the whole of that last race where he had to make all the overtakes, and ultimately failed at the end of the race where he dropped back down again. But Cherney is just getting that little gap again, and David Rowe's closer to Christian than Christian is to Cherney, and we've really got to see him put some good laps in now to see whether he can hold on.
Yeah, I have a feeling that unless something changes, we're going to see a bit more deja vu than we had in race 1, because it's all looking a bit too familiar in the fact that we've got Cherney in the lead now trying to pull away, and now Christian Zaruta under threat from, guess who, David Rowe. So it looked very familiar to the first race, but now Zaruta knows he has to try and do something, otherwise he's not going to try and take a victory. There's the pack heading through out of Coppice and down Park Straight as it winds its way towards the top of the hill and towards Park Corner for the second time. And there towards the back of the field you saw the white Caterham of Blair McConaughey as the top 3 have closed up a little bit more through the braking zone of Park Corner. There's the scrap going on for 5th, 6th and 7th. So that's Steve Arnell ahead of Guy Crawford and Paul Fernell. Will Rossetti still holding on to 8th. He was battling there with Elmo Gisselling. The rest of the field comes pouring through, out through the gooseneck and down towards Mansfield at the bottom of the hill. And I think this time that Cherney's not being allowed to get away too far, because they head through the left-hander. Rossetti's still there with Rowe on his tail. Gallagher's starting to get into a little bit of no man's land because he's 1.1 seconds ahead of Arnell, but he's in turn 1.7 behind the battle for the top 3 as they head back to the mountain for the second time. And that gap is staying at about half a second now. So I think this is better from Christian Zaruta on this second lap here in this second race, but he needs to try and use the pace he's got here to stay with him close and to use that toe wherever he can on the short straights to try and keep him just in shooting range of an opportunity to pass, because if he keeps on making mistakes like running wide or making a mistake in sliding around in places, the advantage he might have now, the possible little opportunity he's starting to try and craft here, they're going to start fading away quickly, and he might even come with a threat from Rowe once again for second.
He is about 0.7 of a second behind Cherney here, and at this point in the simulator world you start getting the toe at about half a second. He needs to get back 2 tenths, maybe 3 tenths now, in order to be able to get that toe and really start helping him zoom along these straights. It's so important to hook up with these apexes coming around Charlie's and onto the back straight, and say you can just see it. It's tantalising, isn't it? He's just out of reach in front.
Desperately trying to close in as much as he can, and the problem is now he's got David Rowe, who he's definitely within that half a second range, closing in. The only way you can get that much closer is if he does just that, breaking for the corners, trying to make up time. But of course he's got to try and balance late braking with having the right line and keeping the momentum through each corner in order to make sure he doesn't lose any speed on the exit and allows Cherney to get away, because in many cases a corner exit is more important. As we see, Guy Crawford's had an issue, he's now back onto the road, so unfortunately Guy, who was running up in 6th, and Paul Fernell have had trouble too, so they're running pretty close to each other. So I suspect, Chris, there's been a bit of something's been at play between those two. Almost both come off the road. I was trying to look for the word, but I couldn't find it. So some kind of mischief has gone on between them, and the result is that both have ended up off the road. I suspect maybe contact between the pair was at hand there. I
like to use the shenanigans, as you know. Certainly, yes. As we saw Fernell wait for, as Christian really does launch over that, he's really pushing hard to see if he can gain any benefit. So because Paul was waiting there for Guy Crawford to go back through, I imagine that it was a Paul making contact with Guy that caused that issue.
I would argue that the less time your car spends with all 4 wheels on the ground, the slower it's going. So I admire Christian Zaruta pushing, but I'm not sure if that actually gained him much time. In fact, it didn't. It lost him a couple of tenths.
You can't brake, Scott. It's not just about gaining a speed. It's actually about losing that speed as well, and you're going into a hairpin. So yeah, I agree with you absolutely.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. Truthfully, I hadn't considered that, honestly. But yeah, if you're in mid-air, the brakes are practically useless unless you've got any kind of aero device on there, which of course is frowned upon in this championship, and it is in real life as well. This is Andrew Parker, who's made some good progress up in the first couple of laps. He's up to 8th, and he's now just behind Emil Jaselink, and I hasten to add, well, I was optimistic for him then until he went off the road just then, but staying in 8th behind Emil Jaselink, and I think obviously these guys have benefited from whatever happened between, I'm presuming something happened between both Paul Fernerhuff and Guy Crawford. And Guy Crawford's already made up a position past Jim Erlam now, so Jim's obviously either had some more strife or just not running at the same pace he was earlier. Tim Allen's got past Alan Curtis by the looks of things. He's been up to 12th position. We're back on board with this three-way scrap for the lead, and still Christian Zaruta is keeping Cherney within a second. So now David Rowe's getting a bit ragged as he runs wide on the exit of Mansfield and makes the sprint towards the mountain once again. We're coming up to half distance already, 8.5 minutes to go as he turns in, down a couple of gears to the mountain. Flicks left and then right over the crest and into these deceptively quick hall bends. It winds its way through the natural landscape of the circuit and now down towards the hall corner, and he catches a little bit of air heading into the hairpin, and the gap it's staying at 7/10, so I think Zaruta might have possibly found a bit of a groove here, and he's not quite letting Cherney get away, but as you say, in the sim here the toe starts taking effect at about half a second, so he's close but just agonisingly just quite close enough to do anything about possibly trying to get past him. He was 2/10 quicker that time by, so that was overall quicker. He was a 10th faster than Rowe as well, so as the top three, Zaruta was doing everything right there, but he needs to put in maybe a couple more laps like that with 7.5 minutes to go to stand any chance of possibly denying Cherney a clean sweep of both races tonight.
Yeah, I think let's hope we see more of that. Just focusing in here, this is the closest battle on the track. We've got Tom Allen here, sort of relatively new to our servers and doing a great performance. So he's, I think he's racing this weekend at Cadwell, so we'll get in some practice, and he's just following along with Tom McEwing, who I think Tom is going to be racing in next year's academy. So he's getting lots of practice ahead of his debut. Let's see what Tom Allen can do at the top of the hill up here. He had an accident coming into this bend in the 420s on grid B last week, so he may be a bit cautious, and yeah, he chooses to sit down behind, but McEwing does defend up the inside, so yeah, he doesn't have the chance to undercut there, but yeah, this battle is definitely developing now with Alan Curtis joining in as well.
Whilst we're watching that, I was keeping an eye on the 2 cars behind these 3, because Blair McConaughey has just got past Guy Crawford, so up to 14th place goes the recovering Blair McConaughey. So he's got past Crawford, who himself is recovering. We're going back to our leaders here as the gap has crept up another half a second now, so either something's happened or Cherney simply is just that good and turning up the wicket just a bit more to give Zaruta something to chase further, and possibly saying, well, you're a real life racer, Christian, try and handle this. He's trying as best he can, but the gap has gone out to that 1 second, and it was the same as it was in race 1. Once it goes to over a second, it seems as though it's almost virtually impossible to try and claw back, which is unfortunate to say, but it's looking very much like it was in race 1, Chris. But in terms of Cherney has this race completely under control, and all Chris can do is push as hard as he dares and hope that David doesn't close up enough to make a move for second, as Cherney puts in another new fastest lap of the race to again put himself near qualifying place, which is pretty stunning. Yeah,
no, it is a definite replay. We're just seeing a bit of a server glitch at the moment. It looks like we're having a few ping issues, so hopefully all the guys can hold it on track. Although I did see that Tom Allen went back to the pits, so maybe he's had some issues with that side of things. But yeah, it does look like the server actually had a glitch rather than individual people, and therefore it's just a matter of holding on. But it looks like it's all settling down again now, so we can see they're all under control.
Yeah, also Jim Adam appears to have exited from this race as well, unfortunately. So what was a pretty tough second race hasn't really ended well for him with about 5.5 minutes to go. Still with the leaders, gap is almost 1.5 seconds now between Cherney and Zaruta, and I hate to be a sort of bearer of being someone who's a bit sort of defeatist, but it does seem as though that unless something happens to Cherney, touch wood, I can't see possibly Zaruta pulling this back. I don't doubt his ability. He was doing some great racing in a couple of sim racing series during lockdown. Of course, he's decided to jump across to what he knows best in the real world, which is Caterham's, and while he certainly is pretty potent behind the wheel of a virtual and a real Caterham, he's not quite got the pace of someone who has developed the handling for these cars 24 hours a day, almost 7 days a week in his spare time. So he's certainly trying to get the gap back as much as he can, because the gap is 1.1 now, so unless Zaruta's got the college in the car and he's listening, he seems to have possibly called something back, but he's certainly going after it, and maybe it's not over because he's got 3 attempts at, but it all depends on how well he can go through these last couple of corners, which I think possibly Sony might have a bit more of an edge on, because he seems to claw the time back he loses through Hall Bends back in those last couple of corners and exiting onto the pit straight. So it really is tit for tat between these two guys, and David Rowe in third just sat there with the front row seat.
I think I'd argue that actually we've seen Shrita have the pace. Like I said, on pre-qualifying he was able to come first. It's just that consistency, isn't it? It's the one mistake every 10 laps. It seems like Cherney doesn't make that mistake, whereas people like Christian have still got the we've seen him running a little bit wide, and every single time that happens, you just cost yourself a little bit of time. And they're the tiny differences that these guys are racing with. And yep, it's a very much a deja vu in this race at the moment, but that gap is just tantalisingly hanging there, isn't it? It's almost like Cherney's teasing us.
It's creeping down a little bit now. It's under a second, so maybe Zarita has managed to find his groove. He's quite late to do so, but the gap is just, as you say, just hanging around a second, just over or just under. But Zarita's just trying on, and that's not them running wide. It's possibly a bit of a server glitch we mentioned. So apologies if there is one or two weird things of cars drifting wide. It's not that, it's simply just the server having a bit of a tantrum, we'll call it, for a second. Richard Gallagher's still doing well, and again, he's in what I call no man's land. He's not really catching the cars in front, but he's not being caught by the cars behind. He's just enjoying his own race in 4th place and enjoying himself pretty well for what's been a very solid performance, and what I think is the first time I've seen him in grid A, certainly making the most of it, Chris, because he really is pushing on pretty well and proving that I think he's not quite the pace of the top 3 yet, but he's certainly quite formidable. If he does any more rounds, he'll certainly be up there around the top 10 with a bit more competition around him.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing him race more on this Academy grid. So we've got about 3 weeks, I think, before our next Academy race. And yeah, Richard will be back looking to see what he can do around the Thruxton circuit next.
So currently 4th position at the moment. Lee Gap keeping tabs on it. And Cherney's found 3/10. He's got the gap out now to 1.4 again. So whatever's happening on the second half of that lap didn't quite work for Zarita. 2 laps to go by Make It, because they crossed the line with about roughly 2 minutes 40 to go, so that is enough for 2 more laps. Here's the view from David Rowe in 3rd place, picking up the spanner rather than the sim racing wheel this weekend. Of course, going to be running DPR Motorsport for the first rounds of Caterham Motorsport this weekend. Just getting a bit of a taste of the circuit, what the drivers can expect this weekend before he has to lead the team this weekend at the real Cadwell. Through the right-hander at Park Corner. He's now 1.5 again, and Zarita is possibly getting a little bit more ragged as he starts to lose time, both in the race and also to the car in front. And it could be an opportunity here again for Rowe, as he's less than half a second behind, which means he does get the benefit, however small, of that toe. Just flicker the brake lights on as they come through the gooseneck, and now down towards Mansfield, down a gear and through the left-hander. And I think potentially, touch wood, unless I'll put the contest cursor on it now and something happens to Cherney, the Czech driver appears to have his one in the bag, Chris. It's again like it was towards the end of race 1, where Cherney has that gap that just seems just that little bit too insurmountable, and it just leaves Zarita to have to deal with his DPR team boss behind him to try and fend him off for a podium place.
Yeah, and I think Dave's he probably is hanging in there, but ultimately he's got the best chance of making a move, or trying to make a move on this last lap. So can he can he do it with, like say, 1 minute 10 on the clock? This is going to come on to their last lap now. I wouldn't put it past him to make a move, at least try for one, but again, that gap is just, these Academy cars just seem to be set to, one little mistake and you lose that momentum all down the track, and so just get that gap which you just can't make up on the next, takes you another lap to draw it all back.
It's pretty similar to the Academy cars in real life, particularly when I was watching them in the Alton Park races in the wet with this year's Academy car drivers. It does seem as though you just push a little bit too hard in whatever conditions you've got, and the car can go from being very forgiving to very brutal and very to the point in terms of how tricky the handling is. So we're on the last lap then. 1.4 seconds is the gap, and again, Zaruta's quite good on that first few corners if he hooks it up right, but it looks like Cherney just has enough through the next few corners to try and close that gap in. He needs a mistake of some kind, which I can't see happening for Cherney, but then now I've said it will probably curse him on the rest of this lap. And then 3rd place now for David Rowe. There is Cherney. We haven't had to worry about him too much in terms of looking at him on camera, because it's been the 2 guys behind that have been chasing after him, but he certainly does seem to have the measure so far. I would have betted that possibly if James Murphy had been around, he might have possibly given a bit of a challenge here and been in this lead group, depending on how quick he might have been had he set an ultimately fast lap time. I think a shout out also to Will Rossetti, who's been staying in 6th position after his very quick start, and he's holding on to that position. As for the other 2 drivers that were coming up to the field, Paul Ferneyhoff is in 13th, and Matt Shepard is up to 8th now, so a couple more drivers managed to climb their way back up through the order, which is good to see. But into the hall bends and towards the hairpin for the last time, Jaroslav Cherney is proving that when you give him the opportunity, he will take not just an inch, he will take an absolute mile. And running wide on the exit of the final couple of corners there was Christian Zaruta. He might lose second place if he's not careful on the sprint to Malign. It is going to be 2 from 2 for Jaroslav Cherny, but the sprint for the checkered flag for second is going to be crucial between Zaruta and Rowe. They're going to hit the line together. It seems they're going to be side by side, but Zaruta was very lucky to hold on there after just almost losing that position in the last couple of corners. Zaruta does get second, Rowe is third, Gallagher on his own gets fourth, as is Steve Arnell, who gets the top 5. Good effort from Steve. Rossetti recovers to 6th. A great drive there for Andrew Parker. Well done for 7th to get himself into the top 10 after a strong few opening laps. Emil Jaselink is 8th. Matt Shepard is 9th. And then rounding out the top 10 a few seconds back is just going to be Paul Hawker, is it? Across the line? Yes, but only just. Because Guy Crawford did really close in towards the end. And he was trying to recover after his little mishap with Paul Fernerhuff. So it's Blair McConaughey 12th. Fernerhuff is 13th. Tom McEwing still learning ahead of his academy year next year in 14th, and then the last car that's set to finish the race is going to be Alan Curtis across the line, because we lost Tom Allen and also Jim Earlham as well. So 15 cars finishing out of the 17 that started. Of course, we lost Tom Allen, not home improvement, and it's not Jim Earlham. It's Jim Earlham as well, who didn't finish the race sadly. So a double victory for Jaroslav Cherny. Then we'll just quickly confirm the result on screen. And so it is Jaroslav Cherny who does the double here at Cadwell Park. Christian Zaruta picking up another second, and David Rowe another third place. Richard Gallagher with a very impressive pair of 4th places tonight. Steve Arnell takes a personal best with 5th from Will Rossetti in 6th. Andrew Parker, very impressive and solid drive to keep trouble free to pick up 7th. Then Emil Jaselink 8th from Matt Shepard 9th, and Paul Hawker rounding out the top 10 on his debut. And it's Guy Crawford, Blair McConaughey, Paul Fernerhuff, who had to try and recover after his contact with Crawford, then McEwing and Curtis. As we mentioned, we lost both Tom Allen and Jim Earlham throughout the race. So 2 rather intriguing races tonight, Chris. We didn't see much in the way of admittedly overtaking, at least on screen, but at least it did give us some talking points and some rather tension-filled points as to whether or not Zaruta was going to have enough to be able to overhaul Cherny in the end. He got close on occasions in both races, but didn't quite have that little bit extra to be able to deny Cherny the double tonight. But certainly there'll be some momentum he'll try and carry on into Thruxton, where it's a very different circuit compared to Cadwell. Cadwell's very twisty, Thruxton is very, very fast. And we saw the races in the first series during lockdown, where the races were very thick, the action came thick and fast, lots of battling, lots of tow, lots of two abreast and 3 abreast, lots of overtaking. Very different circuit. It could mean a very different result in a few weeks' time when we go to the virtual representation of Hampshire's Speed Bowl.
You really can't get 2 different, more diametrically opposed tracks, can you? It's from the tight, twisty Cadwell to the absolutely fast and flowing Thruxton. So you have to treat, the cars will feel like different machines out there. You have to treat the races very differently, and you can, as a driver, you've got the technical corners here, but around Thruxton, it's all about momentum and really the managing the tow. The person third in the queue at Thruxton can maybe get something like 10 to 12 more mile an hour in real life over at the end of a straight, and even in the simulator we do see sort of 4 wide moments going into the chicane at the end of the lap, just because of the tow and how that track pans out. So like I say, you've got to take one racing brain and put it to one side and put the other racing brain in ready for your next race.
At the strength of the toe, to borrow a phrase from James Walker with Mr. JWW with his brilliant highlights video that he put together of his first academy race, to use the term that he used, the toe is so strong because the Caterham has the aerodynamic properties of a breeze block, which I think is it's kind of a positive to think, because of course we mentioned the fact that the Caterham, the toe is so strong in Caterham. There's not very many other cars that can provide such a different sort of variety of strength of toe and as strong a toe as the Caterhams can, depending on their aerodynamic properties, which they don't have. And it's quite interesting to see. So yeah, 2 very different circuits and 2 very different prospects in mind. I think it's time, Mr. Hutchinson, for you to go and have a wander into the paddock in the virtual pit lane and see if we can grab a couple of drivers who give us their thoughts on what happened tonight. So I shall let you loose and do your sort of Martin Brundle style pit walk in any case and see what you can find.
Well, I think first of all, I'm going to see. We'll hopefully get Dave in the commentary box. But firstly, Richard. I don't know, Richard Gallagher. Have you got a voice on? Ooh, I could hear something. I didn't hear you say anything then, Rich.
You can hear me okay?
There we go, Richard. So this, I think this is one of your first races with us. Certainly, the first time you've been that high up. How's your evening gone, for one? I mean, it looked pretty good.
I'm just chuffed to bits, to be honest. I was a bit disappointed back at Alton. I had a bit of a tangle in race 1 that ended it for me. So I just seem to find a little bit of a spot, not quite up front and just ahead of the pack, which would have been a nightmare to be in. It was so close from what I could see.
Yeah,
And maintained it.
yeah, and I like it. Just seemed that everyone just spread out, and you did all find your little sort of place on track. Maybe a couple more tenths, and you would have been right in that lead battle.
Took me until about halfway through the second race just to relax a little bit and start enjoying it. Then my lap times picked up a little bit more. But I loved the experience. It was fantastic.
Yeah, well, congratulations, and we look forward to seeing more results of this. You'll be back with us in the academy for Thruxton.
I sincerely hope so.
Great stuff. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, and I think we will also drag in David Rowe if he's about. So, David, have you got us in the commentary box?
Hear you, yep.
Hey, Dave. What a race! You sat there and kind of watched the lead battle, but actually mostly just watching the rear of Christian's car for the whole of those two races.
Yeah, Christian gave me a nice bit of coaching in that over those two races. He gave me a bit of a head start, a bit of a jump forward, so that was nice of him. In race 1, there was a bit of a lag problem, and then I missed a gear, so I dropped back. And then in race 2, Christian just failed to have the pace to bring us forward to Cherney.
Again, Cherney being relentless with his accuracy and his lap times. He was putting in qualifying laps pretty much lap after lap.
Yeah, he was at one or two tenths, quicker every lap. And I thought old Schnizzle could pull it out the bag and bring us closer, but we never quite got there.
I don't think we've got audio on Christian yet, but we'll hopefully get him in the commentary box in the future. But you must be looking forward now to the real race weekend. I guess you're packing up and taking DPR team out there tomorrow.
Yeah, that's right. No, everyone's really really stoked for it. The truck is already en route. We're leaving first thing in the morning. We're setting up at the end of the day. 2 days of testing, and I think we've got sun on order, so it's looking all right.
Yeah, I think percentage chance of rain was about 10%, so enough to make you on edge at least a little bit.
Nah, it'll be all right. It'll be fine. It'll be sunny. But I think Christian may be on the mic, so if you wanted to interview him, he could be around.
Okay, well, we'll say thank you very much, David. Well done. We'll see you at the next one.
Yeah,
Lovely.
I'll see you there too, David, because I'm up there this weekend. So I'll see you there. Maybe if I get some chance on Friday or Saturday, if I'm around, I'll see if I can find you and have a chat. So.
Great stuff. See you there.
Okay, then let's briefly try, Scott, and see whether we've got Christian. Christian, can you hear us? Didn't catch that.
Hello.
Ah, there he is. Well done, I think is in order. A couple of tenths away, maybe on a lap by lap basis. Cherney seemed to pull out another 2 tenths going into this race meeting that he didn't show all week.
Yeah, I don't know where that came from. He was certainly, I think, on the 1 lap pace. I kind of I was close, but he was just so consistent. Like every lap, he'd just bang them in, and I just made a few mistakes trying too hard. That classic of trying too hard and going backwards a bit, unfortunately. But yeah, he drove very well.
Still, I would say it's a pretty strong performance. You've had a very good start to the season, given that your sim only arrived, a couple of weeks ago. You must be fairly pleased with how it's all going so far.
Yeah.
Always want more.
You know me, Cheese. I'm still chasing that win.
Yeah, of course. I'm sure it will come soon. So I guess you just keep plugging away.
Yeah, will do.
All right. Well done, and we'll see you at the next one.
Cheers, guys, and hi, Mum. I'm on YouTube.
Excellent stuff.
He had to get that in right at the end, didn't he? Just a quick hi, Mum, on TV. Good
Excellent
stuff. So yeah, that pretty much wraps things up for tonight's action, of course, in the Caterhams. I guess final thoughts from Chris. 2 races where, admittedly, didn't see that much overtaking, but it was still pretty decent in terms of the racing that we had. Cherney, I think, has almost certainly taken the championship lead, given the fact that James was in Group B tonight. But it certainly is pretty ominous, the fact that if he's able to be that quick on a twisty circuit, it could possibly mean his chances are pretty decent on a quick circuit like Thruxton. But of course, it depends on who manages to turn up for those 2 races, and if James can actually get himself into Group B, and if McMaster comes back and a couple of others also make appearances who weren't here tonight, like Chris Skillicorn, if they can possibly get themselves into the mix and possibly cause a bit more trouble this next time by.
Yeah, you saw the you saw the little gaps that were on the field. Well, those gaps are certainly going to be filled by McMaster and everyone else who's away at the moment, and Murphy and people like that who just aren't on the grid tonight. So you can expect more of the same. But like I say, it's going to take a different skill at different tracks. We haven't yet found Cherney's weak spot. We have seen him where he hasn't won races, so you know there's still hope for everybody. And as you heard, Christian's not shy of just trying to put in the effort to really come good, and he's very thirsty for that race. And he's certainly got the he's wily on track, and he knows how to construct a win.
I think he does. So, quick look ahead as to you're about to put up on the screen before we did your final comments there, is the look ahead to what's coming up for the next two Esports Championship races, both of course being at Thruxton in Hampshire, the virtual version of course. So the 420R Championship cars will be out on August the 11th, that is 2 weeks before they head out for real life at the Thruxton round, and of course then the week later, on the week of their race meeting, it'll be the Academy cars next, of course, in action. Thruxton, now the fastest circuit in the UK after Rockham's unfortunate demise, and it is a fantastic place. And as Chris mentioned, it is very much a complete polar opposite to what you get here. It's very tight and twisty, but it's very wide and fast at Thruxton compared to Cadwell Park we've had here tonight. Just before we go, of course, a quick reminder, of course, that tonight has, of course, been sponsored in the Caterham Academy Championship for caterhamracer.com. It is sponsored, of course, by Just Add Lightness, high-performance LED lights for the Caterham 7. You can go and check them out on their website, justaddlightness.co.uk, and they should also be on Facebook as well, so if you want to go and check them out. And if you have a Caterham, I'm sure you can check them out. If you want some extra bright lights, if you're driving around in the dark anywhere in places, be sure to go and hit them up, and I'm sure they'll be able to do so. www.justaddlightness.co.uk for their website, and thanks as always for their sponsorship of the championship. From myself, Scott Woodwiss, and Chris Hutchinson, and all of us in the series at caterhamracer.com, thank you for watching. If you are heading to Cadwell Park this weekend, do enjoy it. Of course, remember, if you are going to go, you must have tickets bought in advance. You cannot buy them on the gate, just purely for safety reasons due to all the restrictions in place. But if you are going up there, if you're racing, if you're spectating somebody, be sure to enjoy it. It's going to be fantastic to watch Caterham Motorsport properly get their entire season underway with all 5 championships. And for those esports fans, we'll be back in action in a couple of weeks with the first of 2 visits to Thruxton for the 420Rs. But from all of us here, have a brilliant rest of the evening. Enjoy Cadwell Park if you're going, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Goodbye.